Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest on the collapsing hospital scandals, as they appear to be no longer falling just onto their own floor, but patients and doctors now. I don't understand how this is not a major scandal, especially when it has now been reported in the mainstream media. Do people just price this in for the Conservative government now? Do we just shrug our shoulders as doctors are taken out of action because a building fell down on them? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I appear to have got something quite badly wrong last year. With the growing scandal of public buildings, schools and hospitals most notably, simply falling down because the government were not replacing them at the end of their expected lifespan, I boggled at how insane this was. I was thinking, hang on a minute, you know, what would the government do if a school ceiling actually fell on a child? Surely they can't risk headlines like that. And although I focused on schools because of my teaching background, I imagined the same scenario if a hospital fell on a patient or staff. Surely that would be curtains for him. Game over. Why on earth are they not doing something about this? So imagine my surprise when I read in the Sunday Times of hospitals collapsing on both patients and doctors. What's incredible is that the incidents they were reporting on, one happened in Essex, a very Tory county, with MPs like Priti Patel and James Cleverly. It seems a sort of madness. The ceiling fell in on an intensive care ward onto a patient on life support. A doctor's leg was broken. Another collapse, this time it was in London. Both of these incidents occurred just last week. It's been discussed in Parliament, yet I think the general public are largely ambivalent to it. That hospitals are not just collapsing or being declared unsafe, taking away resources needed to treat people, but actually collapsing on top of people now. Imagine this being a case for a private business, if like a warehouse kept randomly collapsing on the workers or customers because the business owners couldn't be bothered to maintain the premises. That wouldn't be allowed. I mean, that'd be massive news, and then wouldn't be allowed. In fact, imagine, these were NHS premises, but under a Labour government. In fact, here's another one to add to the list of what's different between Labour and the Conservatives. Labour don't allow hospitals to exceed their expected lifespan and just fall on people. In the same report, it explained how in one hospital, because both lifts had broken down, if a patient had a cardiac arrest and needed moving to a different ward, they had to call an ambulance to get the paramedics to deal with it. Have you ever heard anything so mad in your life? An actual hospital having to call an ambulance. Why on earth is this not plastered all over the front pages? Not just one, all over them. Too easy to just say that the Tory client media are covering for their fellow rogues. I mean, the media have reported on damaging stories before. This is a Tory media outlet. And also, not all of the mainstream media is batting for the Conservatives, just most of it. But, one article in the Sunday Times, that's all I see being promoted. I mean, there's a different NHS story on the front page of The Guardian today about covering up evidence of poor care. But surely headlines like hospital collapses on patient's face or crumbling hospital breaks doctor's leg. I mean, is that not a lot of interest to the public? But copy editors presumably know what they're doing. Perhaps a story about a cover-up is more newsworthy than a story about hospitals actually falling on top of people. Maybe people just price it all in now. You think back to 2010. Labour lost the election essentially because of the banking crisis. It's always a little more complex than that, of course. But the public were thinking, look, they failed to protect the economy. They've been in power for a while. Let's spin the wheel again. Yet public services were still being managed, and you could still see improvements in the data. Waiting lists were continuing to come down, not go up. We had more police per capita. We had more police stations. We had libraries still back then. We had twice the number of bus routes as we do now. People's incomes in real terms were still way higher than when Labour first came to power. Right now, incomes are still below the 2010 levels in real terms. Basically, we had a global banking crisis and Labour got the blame, as sitting governments often do. But the country was still functioning. Schools and hospitals were still being built, not falling down. How did we go from that being not good enough to people shrugging their shoulders when a hospital literally falls on the face of an intensive care patient or a doctor's leg? You have to marvel in some ways at the manner in which the Tory operation in Parliament and the media has successfully lowered public expectations to this degree, where it's simply not shocking to think that your loved ones might be fighting for their life in hospital, and although you'll be told they're getting the best possible care, the government cannot actually guarantee that the ceiling will not fall down on top of them. Or when, you've got doctors in Ukraine, a country literally being invaded by a superpower, working under safer conditions than NHS doctors in London. It's like the public just shrug their shoulders and say, well, what can you expect? We can expect a government of one of the wealthiest countries in the world to build a country that reflects that supposed wealth. We can demand a government that builds a country where you look around and go, yeah, this is a richer country than Latvia, which at the moment you cannot. Instead of coming up with excuses, actually make things better. Really does amaze me that we finally get reports of these buildings actually falling on people, which I suppose was going to happen at some point. All as a result of government neglect and greed. That's all this is. These hospitals were known to be beyond their life expectancy. They should have been replaced. They were supposed to be replaced. The government even promised they'd replace them, although they called them new hospitals. It was just replacements for these. They didn't even do that. And the public are not outraged. I mean, I'm fairly cynical. I didn't expect that. That maybe the editor managing the Sunday Times layout made a mistake yesterday, putting the story so prominently when no other outlet really bothered. Perhaps the rest knew that the country are just so downtrodden that this doesn't even register an interest. No point on reporting it. Nobody cares. Just keep talking about the Tory clown show until they finally call an election. Speaking of which, more Tory clown show in an extra video this evening because they're really going to town with that one. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.